Hello and welcome back, everyone. Happy Thursday. Today's not just going to be a Dev Diary rundown, but we do have Dev Diary 107, but instead, the bigger thing is going to be, we're going to be talking about the Spheres of Influence announcement that dropped yesterday. We went over it several times on stream. If you watched the stream and you watched, the rundown of it there, you're probably not going to get too much information when we're going over that you did not see before. A really substantive part of this being also the screenshots that are apparent on the workshop now for Spheres of Influence, giving a lot of information and hints as to what's going on. And so we'll just kind of crack this out in order, starting with Dev Diary 107, which is the post-release update of 1.6, which dropped yesterday, Spheres of Influence, and more on trains. The trains are big nice, so we like the trains. Hello to the last Dev Diary on 106. They didn't wish us a happy Thursday. Terrible. Who's writing this copy? A little mashup between 1.6, Spheres of Influence, and the train pack. It is I, Pelly, here to the voice of Victoria. We're supposed to read it in Mysterion's voice. We don't know that reference, so alas, we cannot. We released the hotfix 1.6.1 this morning, which didn't really change too much, it appears, but it fixed a Mac crash and this sort of stuff. Otherwise, for 1.6, we are looking to address a number of upcoming issues in the patch, including but not limited to, and this is a key that's pretty important because we'll kind of give at the end kind of our impression based on 12 hours of play on the patch. A crash in the census panel, the radicals and loyalists in the census panel being reversed, oopsie doozies, embargo not being allowed below poor relations, script errors that may cause large error logs. We are looking at these issues as soon as we can, and we will address and update people further when we do have more information within the next week. Overall, the rollout seems to have some pretty significant problems, but they have fixed what has been my biggest complaint for a long period of time, which is they have made diplomatic plays more transparent. There are also reports of performance being affected on certain machines, for example, AMD CPU chips. We are on the AMD CPU chips, but a lot of people were reporting this in the stream last night. The performance does seem to be a little bit worse. They are being investigated currently as of writing this, and I think you have to keep in mind that this person is writing this as part of their day, as other people are trying to fix the things, and so they don't necessarily get reported to the author of a dev diary in a timely fashion. So I assume they're being worked on and fixed currently. We are currently experiencing issues with 1.6.1. We ask you to ensure mods are turned off and you aren't loading from an old save. But for the most part, it seems like maybe a good look is to wait for 1.6.2 or this type of thing overall. And for the surprise announcement yesterday, first up, Spheres of Influence. It's been pleasing, which is big hype and big nice. It's been very nice to see the response to the Spheres of Influence, including the fun people are having with the trailer. Read people joking aside in... I don't know how to see about this or say this, and how octopuses on the trailer are actually the old ones. There's big octopus, big nice. We'll get to that. There are nice comments on the trailer have been passed to our lovely creative producer. We love the octopus. It's our favorite. The two octopuses. The octopi, if you will. Otherwise, I've been looking at the threads, comments, posts, etc., etc., etc. In particular, everyone is analyzing the screenshots on Steam, which we will get into, and speculation on them. We'll have more information on said features over the upcoming Dev Diaries Big Nice starting out next week, as mentioned in the announcement of Spheres of Influence. So next week, we will be starting to get news on Spheres. Then we have a surprise release of the Train bonus pack. Everyone receives a free train. You get a free train, 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 everybody gets a free train. I've been looking for, actually everyone gets 10 free trains. I've been looking forward to this release ever since we started talking about it internally, seeing them actually coming to being, and I was so happy seeing them and doing the cool video discussion with Mike professional, doing it in one take. Big nice. That's how we do things around here. The work the art and audio team have done is so cool, and I'm so happy to see other people do also like them. Speaking of Mike, behold the prophet of Steam, the maniacal mechanic himself, talking about the background and making of the pack. Okay, they asked me about trains. The fools, they actually asked me about trains. Big mistake for the big nice. Hello, yes, I'm Mike. I'm partial to railroading and trains, railroading history and trains and the such like. I've been working on Victoria 3 for years now, and my way back in the early days, I compiled a matrix of locomotives that would fit into the game based on historical period and countries, so that I could pitch some appropriate locomotives whenever the opportunity presented themselves. He did this ahead of time. The matrix looked a little bit something like this.
which I remember watching the movie, and the movie looked nothing like this. This is way more trains and way less green, but okay, fair enough. So when I got approached a while back and asked if I could recommend any trains that our team could add to the game, I cackled like a goddamn maniac, opened up the matrix and sort of gestured at the screen and continued to laugh for a few more minutes. Then I got nervous. Trains are serious business. Train people have serious opinions on trains. Very serious. We had to pick only one locomotive per country per period, and there are so many trains. In some cases, there are so many countries. Germany trains are supposed to cover all of the Germanys. Would a Prussian locomotive be appropriate for Baden? Would a Bavarian engine work for Hanover? I'm sure that everyone has their own opinions about which locomotives are the most emblematic of German locomotive design in the Victorian era. That includes you. Ultimately, I picked the Austrian locomotive because I once visited a museum near Vienna that actually had one around, and it was a neat museum. You should go visit the Eisenbahn Museum, Das Heishaus. It's cool and fun. So here's the locomotive in question. This is my picture. Also went to the museum, etc. Ooh, Pellywet. Okay, big nice. The majority of the work was on this front. I got to put out designs, supply references to art, and then sit back and opine at length about why these trains were neat, while the art team did the real work of modeling them and getting them working in the game. I've got to tell you, folks, being asked to give opinions about trains and have that count as work felt amazing. That's got to be a big nice. A fun one to baffle the artist with was John Bull, but it's explained a lot more in the video, which we will briefly take a look at, but we won't watch the entire video. It's a fun video, go watch it. There is a link. But John Bull is such an awful mess of a locomotive. Originally, it was nice and tidy British export in the early 1830s. Engine designed and built around a distinguished Robert and Stephenson company, a classic 040 design. Everyone knows what a classic 040 is, right? Okay. It didn't last long in the state. Here's kind of one of them. Turns out American tracks in the 1830s sucked. The truth hurts, they sucked a lot. The routes were windy, the rails were quite awful. Quality was just awful. In order to operate under such conditions, the locomotive crew began making modifications and more modifications and more modifications. By the time it fully left service, it looked nothing like the original machine. So then what should it look like in Victoria 3? Because, like, several iterations. I recorded appearance and changed several times over the years, but one of the biggest considerations here was to make the train distinctive from the others, so you could easily say that an American train isn't a German one and that a British one isn't a French one. We would never want to make this sort of mistake. That led us to the choice to use the current form that the locomotives found in, preserved in the Smithsonian. There's enough modifications to make it weird, but not so many that it looks like it did in its sorted state at retirement. It makes it look distinct, and that's the key consideration here. So here's the John Bull. God, what a weird little machine. Except it's a huge machine. Ultimately, though, it's been fun and terrifying to put it through the stuff, etc., etc. He's done a lot on trains, and also trains. Thanks very much, Mike. Very informative and engaging. It's always nice to talk about trains with you and see more trains in the game. Je suis un chouchou. Now the correct train sound chouchou or chugga chugga. I'm on Team Chouchou. Comment below if you're Team Chouchou or Team Chugga Chugga. Stay tuned into Radio Victoria, as well as next week, March 14th, we will join Martin with an overview of Spheres of Influence, accompanying with a free update, thoughts behind the expansion, and dev diaries to come between now until release. See you then, Victorians. Okay, so that's the dev diary. Short little bit on trains. Now, here in Spheres of Influence, the Spheres of Influence announcement, we get, this is the release on 1.6 update, and in addition to that, we get the free trains pack. So let's take a quick look at the, video for this. Trains. And you notice each one of these trains is different. They are showing a bunch of different train designs, and these will be appearing in-game if you have the DLC activated, available now. Bonus free trains. You get trains completely for free. And so inside this bonus pack, downloaded for all Victoria 3 owners, we will see new models of classic train engines from the dawn of the rail to the transport used the Iron Horse. This free pack includes a total of 10 new 3D models, train engines traveling across the game map. We have 5 experimental trains for 5 countries: Great Britain, America, Germany, Russia, and France, and then some later ones. as well as a nice video that is on the Victoria 3 YouTube page, which you can find and subscribe to. We can do the train pack deep dive, which is the same gentleman here. We'll watch a little bit of this.
Of it
in particular, I think is a video
much like the Sudban, a six-wheeler
French
type of locomotive, better for freight than for passenger service, but
let's find it.
They're just meant to run in contrast to our not have to worry too much about like what you have to build to support them.
Because
this is in contrast to our final locomotive, French locomotive that required a lot of work, broke down once quite famously.
Much shade,
I apologize to our French viewers, but I'm going to butcher the name just a little bit, but it's the Class 170 West. Most famous for its central role in the Montparnasse crash, where it actually had its brakes fail, blasted right through a terminus, crashed through the outer wall of the station, and then tumbled down a floor into the street below. It's not the most reliable of locomotives.
Not the most reliable.
But it's very emblematic of French engineering and French design in the later Victorian era. These sorts of locomotives, although they had some engineering faults, remained in certain...
Okay, so now we also have the Spheres of Influence announcement that came out yesterday.
Peggy 12.
Which was a lot of octopuses, so now you can RP as an octopus. The octopus, of course, being a piece of
you did
symbolism that was used.
You united them into one powerful block. One banner, one ideology. Your good friends came gladly. And though some required a slightly firmer grip, not a single bullet has been fired. Just one problem.
Someone else has a sphere of influence. Alright. So we're excited about that. So, releasing on May 6, 2024. Spheres of Influence is available to pre-order if you are looking for the best deal possible, or if you're looking for the best deal possible, check out Expansion Pass, etc., etc. And we have this giant thing, which we'll probably use for the thumbnail. But Spheres of Influence has gotten announced, and it's going to be big nice. Now, this just kind of like gives a bullet point of some of the features and the overview. I think we're going to spend more time taking a look at the screenshots, but in particular, you will be able to make power blocks, and you will be able to customize the power blocks. They will give bonuses, and there will be different, you will get to decide for your power block what feature is important, whether it's something like colonization or, liberalization or trade or conservatism. Just kind of spitting out some examples. There are only like one or two examples we actually see, but this is kind of the idea. And then you will get to decide what central tenets are part of your block, which I assume affects the bonuses, and will also affect who wants to join your block if they agree with that type of philosophy or not. They will also be adding foreign investment, which is big hype and super nice. They will be adding the Great Game, which is the struggle between the UK and Russia during the time period, and over specifically Central Asia. I almost said Central America. That's not a thing. Central Asia. There will be intergroup lobbying, where they will lobby for international affairs, not just the internal politics, which is really cool. There will be new subject interactions, enforced nationalization, where you can seize the means of production, or for the most part, you're seizing ownership shares from other countries that are in your nation as part of a diplomatic play. There's power block monuments and more historical flavor. Big flavor, flav, big nice. Okay, so we're just going to take a look at some of these screenshots from the Steam page here that we have for the DLC that we have managed to see. And we can see here Zollverein, which is a power block in Prussia. And we can see there's a bunch of different members here, right? There's cohesion amount. I don't know if cohesion is every block kind of having the same philosophy, or the blocks being like in there for a while. I don't know if it affects the modifiers. We have this unused tab, so that's a placeholder for something. There's this members tab. And here we have principles down here, where you can see one. So this permanent, I don't know if this is a central principle, or even if they have one, but we have construction 3 here. So they're committed to constructing. And then we have this add principle tab here. And so you can see that there's going to be,
I assume that there's a correlation between your principles and your modifiers that you receive, and you can kind of customize things and look to create a base around this power block. But coming in here, you'll be able to customize, the things. I assume that you will be able to sort of, and statue is the Statue of Liberty. I assume that like one of the day one mods is going to be like the anime waifus power block pack, where you can get anime waifus or something. Because I think that's one of the more popular ones on Steam, is like the Rule Britannia or Britannia waifus or something like this. But we will be able to, select principles. I think that you need a central identity pillar. This one's vassalization. So we see vassalization. We also see construction. So we're seeing some of the pillars. Here is Russia, and I think this is part of the Great Game thing. You can see that there's an extension down here, and we're going to get a better map, but you also see that there's a ton of new nations in Central Asia. We see this is some overlord actions. Notable one that seemed pretty interesting is knowledge sharing, and then this is how loyal they are, I think, and I'm not sure if maybe there's a way to diplomatically kind of annex them, which would be interesting. You can also impose laws, and if they made it so, if they improve the feature to make it easier to pass laws, this is really significant. You can grant them their own market. You can appoint a colonial government exempt from service. That's probably going to be nice if you don't want them to be fighting in your wars, and so this sort of thing. And here we have the lobbying system, which appears to be a way to make your interest groups care about international politics, which is very interesting. It's the pro-British lobby. We got the intelligentsia and the industrialists in there. Notably, neither of these are powerful. Something's going wrong in that country. And we see appeasement +2. I don't know if this appeasement is giving a bonus. Maybe it's giving interest group approval rating. This would make a lot of sense if it's giving increased approval rating. And we see the appeasement increases by creating trade agreements, creating alliance, forming defense pact, improving relations, kind of being a good neighbor, or harming relations with rivals. And appeasement decreases by breaking diplomatic pacts, launching diplomatic demands, going to war, harming relations with Great Britain. I assume that's someone else harming relations, not harming your relations with yourself. You gotta love yourself, self-love, big nice. And then taking hostile actions against the subjects of Great Britain. And so we see here what is actually a pretty interesting arm to make it so that, being at war constantly might not necessarily be super good anymore. It's like historically been good. It also seems to affect migration, where you get less migration when you're at war. And so I think that if they can increase the number of features that make being at war constantly kind of not as appealing, this will give the game a little bit more dynamism, other than just like, your infamy is a resource, you kind of want to maximize your infamy decay over a period of time. This is all like really interesting, that it's now your interest groups are going to care about an outward facing thing. And so maybe if you go to a bunch of wars, you get a bunch of negative appeasement and you're going to start getting revolutions, right? And so this is super interesting to me, this outward facing, where they are going to care about stuff. And appeasement, this might not just be just Diplo stuff either. I don't know what all appeasement factors there will be or what type of lobbies you will get, but the fact that your interest groups can now start caring about other stuff, like maybe they'll care if you're on bad PMs or like this type of thing. I have no idea, but this is very interesting. We also have the Great Game. Seeing in here, this is going to be a journal entry, it looks like, between Great Britain and Russia. You can see that there's a little bit of a balance of power here. The game, you have to try and get people into your subject or power block, or get the other one to stop being a great power. And we see here a little bit of an updated map here. We see Persia is now blue, and we see a bunch of new nations. And so there'll probably be better resources in these regions. Certainly Persia's already gotten improved, and so this will be more of a region to fight over, especially if you're Russia or the UK, as per the journal entry. And so there's a lot of local flavor here. And also maybe playing in this region is going to be a lot of fun. Persia's already pretty fun, but let's continue on. And this one's pretty big. You see this toggle privatization button here. This is going to allow ownership to buy these buildings, and I think in a couple of slides from now we'll kind of see what that looks like, but this seems like it's dramatically affecting how ownership works. And you can see there's no ownership PM on this building, is there? Is there an ownership PM on this building, do you see? No, because ownership appears to happen now in different places, and we can see, if we look down here, owner is now 2 levels owned, are owned in Austria, One level owned is owned in Krakow. And so this means that there are nations who own the buildings that are elsewhere. Now, I assume that this is a Krakow, right? I assume that we are using Krakow's PMs, Krakow's tech in this sort of thing. I don't know if they're going to bifurcate it in this way. But instead, what you're going to see is you are going to see buildings in Austria and buildings in Krakow that account for all the ownership of the buildings. And so we'll see that in just a second. But there's no ownership PM here. And so I think that that's pretty significant and interesting. And so we see the manor house. And this is what we're saying, where this is a conglomeration, where this has now a collection of buildings under the manor house, and it is employed by the ownership class in the previous building here. And so this is going to be interesting. We see that the weekly balance is huge. There's no inputs, there's just wages. And so what it is doing, it is separating off all of the non-wages. Like you see here, there's a negative weekly balance, so I guess not all of the non-wages, but there's this negative weekly balance, or maybe this just means it's going to fire down and the weekly balance will always hit 0, and then the surplus goes to the ownership class. And then it goes into the ownership class for buildings like at the manor house, whatever the financial building for that state is going to be. And we see subsistence farms and rye farms in this one currently. If we go ahead, we're going to, well, this is just drip and this is drip. And, the drip is big, nice, but this isn't really, this is what we're talking about, which is the building registry. And so we are going to have this here where you can see in Yorkshire, we have a bunch of buildings owned. Now this is UK, we're playing as the UK, but in theory, if I understand this correctly, if we were to buy, a company as Great Britain in, like, let's say Pennsylvania, we would get a Pennsylvania ownership, and then instead of this Great British flag, it would be a USA flag, and it would show our ownership, and we would have the dividends payouts of that place. And so it seems that they are kind of lifting the ownership class out from the buildings themselves, and instead putting them in the financial districts in those states. And so I don't know exactly where they will be employed. So here's the thing: is I don't know what will happen if we own something in the UK, or sorry, if we own something in Pennsylvania as the UK. And here's kind of a question in terms of implementation: if we own something in Pennsylvania in the UK, where is the ownership going to be working specifically? Will we have someone back at home in the home counties maybe that owns the Pennsylvania buildings, so they will be employed in the home counties, the ownership, the capitalists will be employed in the home counties? Or will we have overseas workers in someone else's country acting as owners, and they will be part of that other person's market in terms of consumption and as a consumer, as well as like for the reasons you care about ownership class and like this type of stuff? Because the ownership class provides a lot of consumption, and so this will be interesting to see how that happens, and also to try and think through what are the ramifications of this. And so that's going to be a very, very interesting. And so these are all of the screenshots, though. Alas, there are not more screenshots. I wish that there was. Here's some drip. But I think what we're going to do now is we are going to talk very briefly about my impressions on 1.6, which is that there's kind of 4 things I wanted to talk about. And this will develop is, first, migration is maybe broken / if it's not broken, which I'm kind of starting to think it's not broken, I need to test more. Well, the values are definitely strange if it's not broken. Well, it's broken if you have any type of migration controls, it seems. But if not, the values seem weird. It seems to be mostly now you are getting very, very little intra-market migration. Even very little intra-market migration. And instead, migration seems to be mainly driven by, the mass migrations. And these mass migrations do not seem to be attraction-driven, but rather exodus-driven. And so, like, in the very early game, it seems like literally nothing is happening. And then as turmoil starts to accrue in places, people start getting upset, people start wanting to leave, you get mass migrations. It might be broken if you have any type of migration impediment to migration. So, migration controls, closed borders obviously should turn off migration. And so that might be broken. And it also just seems like a very winner-take-all affair, because mass migration is now not on the base, and maybe this is the way it worked before and I just wasn't aware. Mass migration is not on the basis of individual migration in individual states, but it's on the basis of the average migration in your entire country. And so what tends to happen is the USA gets a ton of migration and in the early game, and no one else gets any migration. And it's very feast or famine. You are either one of the people with the highest average migration attraction getting migration, or you just don't get migration. And there's like virtually no intra-market migration. Okay, so that's thing 1 of 4, is migration. Thing 2, performance seems to be worse right now. It seems to be bugged. They said something about the AMD thing. A lot of people saying they're bugged, but like the game just seems significantly slower. So I would wait, if you were planning on doing a run that you were planning to play for an extended period of time, I would say hold off until they patch it. Then thing 3 is that diplomatic plays are now very transparent. You can see who's likely to join, how likely they are to join, and the reasons for them wanting to join or not. And this is huge. I think this has been my biggest complaint for a long period of time, so that's good. And there was a 4th thing that I wanted to talk about, and that was that the construction queue bug is not fixed. So the construction queue bug is still happening, so I would still recommend using direct controlled construction. For those of you who don't know what the construction queue bug is, it is that your investment pool will pay for construction goods. And the amount of private allocation that is supposed to be achieved is supposed to be directly proportionate to how much of the investment pool is paying for the construction goods. So if they're paying for 20% of the construction goods, they're supposed to control 20% of the construction. The way it works currently is if the investment pool gets completely drained, what will happen is that instead of getting an amount that's proportionate to the amount they're paying, so if they pay for 20%, they get 20%. Instead, they get the very maximum allowed by the economic system you were using. That's 50% for interventionism, for example, and 75% for laissez-faire. They get the maximum allocation possible. So they're paying for 20% of the construction good, let's say, and you're on laissez-faire, and the private queue gets 75% of the construction. So that means that extra 55% the government is paying for, but the government does not get to choose what gets built. Which means if you're going to play with private queue, probably don't go laissez-faire until you have like 2K construction, something like this. But that bug is still present, and it is kind of a frustrating one. I like playing with the private queue, and I've been playing on direct controlled construction, and so those are the 4 things. Just to like reiterate, go over them very quickly again. It is that the construction queue is still broken. Migration is weird and maybe bugged, but also weird and a lot different. Not 100% sure. I think it's a winner-take-all affair. I think it might be the case that playing tall now is now much more viable because having few states means you can use the migration attraction edict of greener grass campaigns, which seems way stronger to really push up your average. And so it might be the case that playing tall has got like this new sort of breath of fresh air in regards to the migration. We'll see how that kind of shakes out. Just because you can have a higher percentage of states under the migration edict, but you want to have at least 5, otherwise you suffer malice. Anyways, and then also you are having problems with performance. Performance seems to be worse. And then very importantly, the most frustrating feature of diplomatic plays being completely opaque, now they're transparent. And so that's nice. And so that's kind of what's going on with 1.6. We already went over spheres, just like a ton of new stuff, especially the drip. That seems very exciting. Really excited for how the ownership is going to be switching. We have the great game. We have lobbies, which now your interest groups care about other stuff. It just seems like a whole lot of features. Power blocks seem really neat. And then also we have trains. Big nice on the trains. Choo-choo, much excite, big trains. See you all later. Have a happy Thursday.